What do I research in? I've, for the past almost 20 years, been interested in neglected tropical skin diseases, particularly in brucellosa. I have been focused on trying to understand how brucellosa is obtained from the environment. In other words, understand how the bacteria, Mycobacterium ulcerans, that causes brucellosa is transmitted from the environment into human beings who then present the disease. As time has gone on, I've had to be more creative. So now I look at, or I try to study diagnosis of the disease. It's one of the challenges. We are limited by how quickly you can confirm a lesion as being positive for brucellosa. So the WHO has a focus on trying to identify novel markers for diagnosis. So I've been doing quite a bit of research in that as well. And both the transmission arm and the diagnostic arm allows me to do a lot of field work. So as part of my field activities, I have been engaging stakeholders, including healthcare personnel who offer treatment and help with the management of the cases. I've come into contact with patients who have the disease. I've come into contact with traditional healers who have the disease. So it serves as a good opportunity for community engagement to try and demystify the disease and make it less strange or less scary to the naive person. So in a nutshell, this is what I have been doing in terms of research. Am I involved in teaching and training? Yes, I am a faculty at the Department of Biochemistry, Cell and Molecular Biology at the University of Ghana, and I have been teaching there since 2011. And I'm also involved in a World Bank funded Africa Center of Excellence called the West African Center for Cell Biology of Infectious Pathogens. It is a purely research biased institution or center, and it focuses on training graduate students at the master's and PhD and postdoctoral levels in cutting edge research that is important within our sub-region in Africa. So we focus a lot on infectious diseases, and over the years, we've expanded to include some non-communicable diseases, as well as diseases that have a trace back to human genetics. My courses that I teach at the university include applications of molecular biotechnology. I also teach advanced molecular biology at the graduate level. I teach molecular genetics at the undergraduate level. I used to teach some lab courses, but not anymore. And I'm also involved in seminars of our graduate students. My average class size is about 217, 220 students for the undergraduate classes, and for the graduate classes it's about 30 students. I do have an active research group, and because of this, I am able to mentor both undergraduate students and graduate students who come through my lab to do their research. My lab also offers internships for undergraduate students or people who are working in industry who want to learn a skill like microscopy or PCR. So they come in for short periods of time to learn these techniques so that they can apply it or use it to boost their own research repertoire. What is the percentage of female scientists in Africa? Ooh, I think probably the global statistics would put it around maybe 20, 25%. I'm not too sure. In the University of Ghana, it's probably a little lower than this percentage of total women faculty. When you come to STEM research, it drops to under 10%. And this is the reality on the ground. Do I like being a female African scientist? Absolutely. Because I think the challenge that comes with being a female African scientist is not the reason why we shouldn't do it. it is even more so the reason why we should do it, because we are equally as capable as our men counterparts. And we bring something else to the table, which is a broader perspective, the ability to multitask, and the ability to see things from a quite different angle than our male counterparts will be able to. Do I have daily challenges as being an African woman scientist? Absolutely. In Africa, unlike the West, we have peculiar sociocultural norms. We have peculiar expectations for women in general, whether you are a scientist or you are a banker or you are a musician, right? There's an expectation that by a certain age, you should have settled down with a husband or have started a family and have 2.5 kids at a certain age. It's an expectation that has been imposed on us just because of our cultural system, right? And so there's really little that you can do about that without getting seen in a different light. So any one of my colleagues who wants to step outside of this arena of sociocultural expectations definitely has a lot of uphill battles, okay? Women are primarily responsible for looking after the family, raising the kids. If you're a career woman, all of these things pose even a challenge to what you want as your own personal goals. When it comes to the work environment as well, there's also a more emphasis on male dominance. You go for meetings and you'll probably be the statistic, the only woman in the meeting, because most of the time, depending on the level of or the hierarchy of people sitting in the room, you'll find yourself as the only female at the table. And your voice is going to be quite smaller than everybody else who is gathered around the table. There are also challenges with even getting the opportunity to speak up and say what you want to say. And you have to be quite assertive in order to do that and not fear what people will think about you when you stand your ground or say something. It is not a trait that we are brought up with as African women, because mostly society expects that women should be the silent partner in any gathering or any relationship, right? You should be seen but not be heard. And if you indoctrinate women to have this psyche or this mindset, even when they have the opportunity to be heard and not just seen, it takes a lot to overcome that barrier and build the confidence to be heard or to even speak out. It takes a lot of guts, a lot of support or mentorship for people to let you realize that you are capable of saying something which makes sense, and trust in the fact that whatever you said would be heard or would be listened to, or even you would even get an audience. So this in the workplace is another challenge where you have to overcome the gender inequalities in trying to make yourself seen and heard at the same time at the workplace. Do we, or do I as an African scientist, fight for equality and equity? Absolutely, I do. Because in terms of equality, you want to be able to have attained a certain position by way of your output, your own sheer hard work, and not because you were favored. So, for instance, I don't think that institutions in Africa should have a different promotion scale for women versus men. The minute you introduce something like that and sort of slightly lower the bar for women, you open another door of disrespect for women who have been able to climb up the ladder. Because our male counterparts would only say that, oh, you only got there because the bar was a bit lower. So how can we use equity to overcome the challenges that we would face if we are still going to be based in terms of equality or judged in terms of equality. I think the equity has to come in terms of how much help can a female scientist get in order to rise at the same level as her male counterparts. In my reality, for instance, on any given weekday, by 3:30, 4:30 p.m., I have to leave and go and pick up my kids from school. My male counterparts would probably be working much, much later and get a lot more work done. How do I find equity to balance this out? Well, then probably I have to come to work maybe 2 or 3 hours earlier than my male counterpart in order to make up that lost time. In this case, I'm trying to make my own self equitable by myself. How can our organizations or even funding agencies help with attaining the same kind of equity? In this case, I would say probably having different levels of expectations for certain applications. So for instance, if a female scientist is supposed to apply for a particular funding scheme and there is a cap to, for instance, years post PhD or age, to attain the equity, these contexts have to be viewed in the light of the challenges that African female scientists face. So instead of 7 years post PhD, it could be twice that number, 14 years post PhD. Because it takes us twice as much to get the same amount of work done compared to our male colleagues. These are the ways I think equity and equality can help mitigate the challenges that female scientists, female African scientists face just by sheer fact of their socio-cultural problems. Do I have a woman scientist who has inspired me through my career? Oh, I think I'm one of the few people who has been mentored by a strong female scientist. My PhD advisor, Pamela Small, was literally a beacon of hope in my entire life. Her style of supervision, her attention to detail, her trust and belief in my own capability and all her other students' capabilities as scientists, her generousness, her mothering instinct, put me in a very, very good place to have the kind of confidence that I have. And up until today, if I have a problem, I literally just send her a text message or pick up a phone and call her. And it's like the problem never really existed at all in the first place. I don't think many African women scientists have the same kind of experience that I've had. When I came back to Ghana after my training in the University of Tennessee, in the department that I was a former student of where I am now as a faculty member, there were strong female scientists there who were just about retiring. One of them is Dr. Yadefi Osei, and she is just a mother through and through. She's an excellent scientist, but she's a mother. And it shows in her interaction with students. It shows in her interaction with fellow staff or fellow faculty, especially female faculty. She would take every opportunity to help you whenever you have an issue or a challenge. And even the best part is every now and then she'll give you snippets of information on how to manage your time, even manage your home, because she's also a mother and has been through the whole system before. And she was an African scientist a whole generation before I became an African scientist. So her challenges were even more serious compared to what I faced. And so she has this wealth of information on how to plan, how to balance, and she spares no time to tell you, hey, try and do it this way, see if it works, try and do it this way. That kind of mentorship is phenomenal. You can't buy that in the store. There was also another female scientist in my department, Professor Adamafio, brilliant scientist, brilliant scientist. And to very assertive, very firm, and to see how she communicated the science and commanded the science, and how the students respected her because she knew what she was talking about. If you see that and you don't learn from that, then you just don't want to grow as an individual. Okay, and these two females in Ghana that I mentioned were not just mentors to us young female scientists, they were mentors to the male scientists as well, especially the younger male scientists who also have wives and kids. And so she would tell them, hey, treat your wife this way, treat your kid this way. That's the only way you grow. That is holistic mentorship. It's not one-sided. And that's what I believe in. So if you ask me, do I want to be a role model or do I want to mentor other people? Yes, I do. And both sexes. Because it's the only way you can break this socio-cultural dynamic, by letting both men and women appreciate the fact that we are all the same. Not only for the women, but for the men as well, so that they get to respect the female scientists who have been able to get to the levels that they've gotten to. The health system in Ghana is growing, but it's nowhere near exactly what we want it to be. I think in the entire country we have less than 10 tertiary hospitals, less than 5 tertiary hospitals, where specialized healthcare with all the necessary equipment can be accessible to. If you go a step further down to the regional and district hospitals, almost every region has a hospital. Some districts have hospitals. Now, the caveat here is the staff to run these hospitals efficiently, and the access to equipment and consumables that they need to undertake their daily health care, and even the medicine or the drugs that are needed to be delivered. So I can say that we don't have equitable healthcare across Ghana in any way, shape or form. If you live in the city centers or in the capital cities, then maybe yes. Do we have private hospitals or private healthcare centers in Ghana? Yes, we do. Most of them are in the cities, and most of them are very expensive to access. Do we have a national health insurance system? Yes, we do. In fact, every single item you buy, including water, has a small component of tax that goes to fund the national health insurance system. Does it cover all the diseases that we face within our sub-region? Absolutely not. Does it offer all the medication that is required for treating some of these diseases? Far from it. So we still rely on a cash-based system in order to get the best kind of health. Okay, so whether you have malaria or tuberculosis or HIV, you still have to pay a lot to get treatment. Okay, and let's juxtapose this to the average income of a Ghanaian, which is in a month less than $50. Where you have to buy a medication that costs at least $20. How much would you have left for rent? How much would you have left for school fees or utility bills and so on and so forth? So I don't think we have the healthcare system that we deserve as a nation. Let me bring it down to the disease that I work on. So Buruli ulcer is a very, very neglected tropical disease. And unfortunately, it is found predominantly in rural areas that are so far away from the district centers or the district capitals. So you have all these villages that don't have any form of healthcare, except probably traditional medicine, which most of our population relies on actually. And when I got to find out about the disease, which is some 20, 25 odd years ago, the preferred treatment was one injectable called streptomycin and one oral tablet or capsule that you take called rifampicin. And you had to receive the injection on a daily basis. And if you live 20, 40 kilometers away from the city center or the district center, there's no way you're going to be compliant to take the medication. Most of the time, there's one vehicle that would probably leave the rural village to the hospital or to the city center in a day. One vehicle in one direction. If you miss that vehicle, it means you can't get your injection. As time went on, and because WHO saw that this was not going to work to try and treat the disease, more research made it possible to have two drugs in combination that were both orally administered. But again, because of the distance to the health centers, the monitoring to go to the hospital and take the medication could not be done very well. So patients would go to the clinic, they would give them the medication to come home. But this is medication, or these medications are strong antibiotics, which also have side effects. And if you start feeling a side effect, your first inclination is to say, okay, I think it's the medicine that I'm taking, so let me stop taking it. So there's no more monitoring on whether or not you are taking the medicine to heal the lesion. And so the poor lesion, even though on record at the hospital has been ticked as, yes, we identified this lesion, we gave medicine for treatment, in actual fact, the treatment probably never went on. And Buruli ulcer is a painless infection. So you have a huge sore which keeps growing and growing and growing to the point where sometimes the limb has to be amputated completely. There goes your economic power. Because for instance, if you lose an arm or you lose a limb, how are you going to start working or keep working to maintain your families? Some district hospitals that treat Buruli ulcer actually have wards where the patients come and stay for the duration of the treatment. And the minimum duration is 8 weeks of antibiotic therapy. 8 weeks. So if you are in the ward for 8 weeks, taking the medication and being monitored, who is going to feed your family back home if you are your breadwinner? And who is going to pay for your meals for 8 weeks in the hospital? This is the reality of the challenge in terms of access to healthcare in an equitable fashion. WHO has in the past been optimizing an app which can be used on both Android and Apple devices to be able to use just clinical signs and symptoms to diagnose Buruli ulcer. And so the app has been populated with information on what the ulcer looks like at different stages and some symptoms or signs to look out for in order for you to say this is possibly Buruli ulcer. However, the actual case confirmation of Buruli ulcer is a laboratory-based PCR. There are very few district centers that have a thermocycler to run a PCR. And most of the diagnosis is done in the tertiary institutions. So the logistics involved in diagnosing one person can take anywhere from 2 weeks to 3 months because a sample has to be taken, sent to the district center, sent by road to the tertiary center, sit in a queue for someone to process the sample and give you the results and then transmit the information to say, oh, the sample you sent 3 months ago is actually positive, so you can now start treatment. By then, how far would the ulcer have gone? That is the reality. So the app is supposed to shorten this time. One of the things that I personally did during one of my research studies was to use the WhatsApp app. So we organized a training with the healthcare staff, and we got a lot of community volunteers who all had access to an Android device or an Apple device, and could take a picture and put it on the WhatsApp app. Now, who did we include on the WhatsApp app? We included clinicians. We included the National Control Program for Borreliosa. We included the community volunteers themselves. So when the picture is put on the app or in WhatsApp, all these people on the platform can take a look at the clinical presentation of the ulcer and say, this possibly looks like Borreliosa. Let's take a swab sample. So then the community volunteers would take the sample and transfer the sample to the district health centers. So this doesn't involve mobility of the patient, okay? And then somehow the sample is sent and then we get it diagnosed. And because we are also on the app, as soon as we do the diagnosis, we are able to say, yes, it is positive, start treatment. So that shortens the whole transport time and mobilizing the patient to go and get the sample taken. Another level of help that we did was to get a motorcycle for the disease control officer of one of the very endemic communities. And he was also on the WhatsApp platform. So when a picture is taken and it needs to be swabbed, he can easily hop on the motorcycle and move to areas where you can't go with a car, and easily take the sample and send it back to the hospital for transmission onward to my laboratory or the tertiary institutions. And all of that was to shorten the time to treatment. And it worked perfectly. How did we reward the community volunteers? Well, if any of the cases you find end up turning positive, then we give you a small incentive to say thank you for helping us identify a case and moving it onward to treatment. I think AI has come in our era here to help us in this fashion, to help us mitigate some of the challenges that we face in terms of delivering good health care and even getting good diagnosis in a speedy manner. And so it's high time we as researchers work with computer engineers and bioinformaticians and so on and so forth to come up with an even more easy way of doing these same things that we have used in the past, like the WhatsApp platform and the WHO app that they have developed. We need to optimize it to make it more user-friendly, more accessible, and perhaps if some of the work I'm doing to identify a diagnostic marker is able to come up with should I say, a system which can be used very easily without too much technological expertise, then even the disease control officer who is taking the sample can on the spot diagnose the infection instead of having to do what we are doing right now. Oh, what do I dream of what will my story of success look like as a researcher, particularly in the field of neglected tropical skin diseases? So Ghana is peculiar in the sense that we are endemic for almost all of the neglected tropical skin diseases. We are endemic for Borreliosa, we are endemic for yaws, we are endemic for cutaneous leishmaniasis, right? Even lymphatic filariasis, we are endemic for it. WHO has a new approach, or they are proposing a new approach where diagnosis of all of these infections, which most of the time one community is endemic for all of these diseases, can be done in an integrated manner. What do they mean by integrated manner? Well, if you take one sample, you should be able to have one rapid diagnostic test that when you apply the sample on can tell you whether it's BU, leishmaniasis, or yours at the same time. If I'm able in my lifetime to come up with enough research data to inform the development of this RDT, I think for me that will be success. Another marker of success for me, particularly with Buruli ulcer, is to try as much as possible and demystify the disease. Because of the painless nature of the disease, there's a lot of stigma shrouding the disease, okay? Because, I mean, it's not painful, it's ugly to look at, it must be witchcraft. People who have the disease are sometimes even afraid to say that they have a lesion. So if the lesion is on the arm, they would wear something long to cover it so that people don't see it. And then it just keeps spreading. If it's on the limb, they would wear something long so that nobody sees it, because they are just afraid. I hope that through the community engagement activities that I'm doing, I'll be able to have a lot more focus group discussions, a lot more derbers, where we have videos that show that it is not a disease which is caused by witchcraft, it is caused by a bacteria. And most importantly of all, I really want to discover how it is transmitted from the environment to humans. Because the minute we know that, we can have policies that break the chain of transmission. So if it is in a water body and people get infected by the water body, if by all means you have to go into that water body, at least protect yourself so that you don't come into direct contact with the bacterium. If there is something in the human body that makes one person more susceptible to getting the disease versus another person, I would want to know that so that we can use that as a potential vaccine candidate or a potential vaccine candidate to make sure that even though the bacteria is in the environment, when you get exposed, you will not get infection. These are my dreams, these are my desires, and I really hope that in the next 30 years that I think I still have strength to do active research, I'll be able to do this or contribute at least to the knowledge to getting this done. I work on Buruli ulcer. It is a skin infection which causes very big sores on humans. And the bacteria that causes these sores makes a sort of poison or toxin which can kill all the cells, including nerve cells. And because of that, there's no pain. So you have all of these huge lesions with absolutely no pain. Our biggest challenge as researchers studying Buruli ulcer is the fact that we don't understand how the bacteria gets into the human to cause the infections. So my research over the years has been trying to understand the link between the bacteria in the environment and how it gets into humans to cause infections. Because of that, I have access to lesion samples or patient samples. And for that matter, I've also been trying to see what is it peculiar about the sore that we can use as an identifier for the presence of infection. So you can use it to diagnose the infection. And it's taken a lot of time to develop this kind of idea and to even take it further. If, as a researcher, I'm able to uncover transmission or understand how it's transmitted, we can block the transmission so that people don't get the disease anymore. If unfortunately we still can't figure out how it is transmitted, but we are able to come up with a target for diagnosing the disease early, then we can start treatment early so that it doesn't become too much of a burden. In all of this, my research really focuses on trying to achieve equitable health and well-being for all, or the third SDG, so that the people from my country who are affected by this disease in very rural areas don't keep suffering because of the fact that they have a disease which the world doesn't care about because it is only in very rural or poor areas in Africa. I do want to say something about funding and to see if to see if it is possible for international foundations, international agencies to help help with our issue on funding in general, okay? Because unfortunately, most African governments don't support research funding, okay? It's very sad because research drives national development, okay? But most of the time, the research which is driving African national development has nothing to do with health. So as African scientists, we have to depend solely on donor funds from the West. And we are competing with everybody in the world to access these donor funds. However, we have peculiar challenges in our African context because we don't make any of the reagents or consumables. So we have to depend on, when the West gives us money, then we go back to the West to buy the consumables, and it has to be shipped, it has to be cleared, it has to be... My wish is for all of this to be simplified. How? There are very few biotech or pharma agencies of the West based in Africa or based in Ghana. Let me use Ghana as an example. And even if they are there, they are third party. So even though they might have the things that you need, there's an extra cost on the price compared to if you were buying it directly from the pharma itself. I don't know how donor agencies can help us address some of these issues, but they are critical for us to be able to be equally competitive with our compatriots in the West. The other thing too is the access to the funding, or the funding which is available for all of us. Now, and I really like this, but now there's a lot of focus on trying to build up early career scientists in Africa. So there's a lot of money in that pot, okay? But early career scientists means that PhD less than 10 years. You should have gotten your PhD or your degree less than 10 years. So those of us sitting in mid-career or mid-career and above don't have access to any of this funding pool anymore because of the restrictions on age or the restrictions on years since since PhD. I wish that funding agencies, especially for women, would take away some of these restrictions, because the time we take to attain the same level as our peers in the West is completely different. Okay, so we can't be equally yoked that way. Okay, so it's just a suggestion that maybe some of these barriers should be removed so that we can also apply for funding to do the kind of science that we want to do. I'm also particularly keen on mentorship. And so I hope that some of these funds, even though are sometimes meant for research alone, should also fund some of the mentorship schemes that we have, okay, to help the younger scientists also believe in themselves and know that they can do the kind of science that they want to do right there in Africa. We are still being colonized, whether we like it or not. Colonization is happening whether we like it or not. Because, I mean, the one who, how do they say? Is it the one who pays the piper plays the tune or something like that? There's a saying like that, but the one who feeds you determines what you should do. Okay, so even when the funding is coming, as my friend Gloria would say, it is coming only for the celebrity diseases which the world cares about. But unfortunately, the diseases that we work on, which are neglected, I mean, I've written grants where I've gotten a review back that, oh, the science you are proposing is excellent, is good. The disease is not important enough, right? that what does that do to you? That literally breaks your it breaks your entire heart that you are technically sound, but unfortunately you're working on a disease that big pharma doesn't care about. I mean, how we say we want to attain SDG 3 as a world, or how are we going to do that if we still have the big corporations determining what should be done and what shouldn't be done? Who determines what is important for us as African scientists? Why should our diseases even be called neglected to begin with? Why are they called neglected? That tag on the kind of diseases we do is actually not necessary. Why can't it just be called a disease that affects human beings? Why should it be called neglected? The minute you call it neglected, in somebody's mind, oh, okay, it's there, but we really don't care about it. The center that I work for, WACWIB, is celebrating its 10th anniversary this year. We are 10 years old. We've trained quite a lot of people, over 400 graduate students, both at the PhD and master's level in 10 years. And as part of our 5-day activities, we want to invite keynote speakers who have, reached their higher careers in their field of science, who are African, okay? We have more than the number of male candidates right now. We are looking for female candidates who don't work in the celebrity diseases, who work on neglected tropical diseases. And I mean, you can't even find them. To fill them, to give them an audience to come and talk about the science that they're doing. In all the number of female students that we've trained out of the 400, this is probably maybe 35% of female. We were looking for some of our graduate students who have gone on to establish their own careers and are doing very well. We have more than enough male, more than enough. Where are the females? They were excellent students. Some have even won prizes because of the kind of thesis that they wrote. Some have published in top-notch journals. Where are they now? They are starting a family because that's what society says they should do. And their flourishing research career has been put on hold. There was an argument, or should I say a discussion with one of my colleagues when I had proposed one of the names of our students who is now working for a diagnostic lab in Ghana, and she's the national director in charge of laboratory services. When I proposed her name, his first response was, yeah, she's doing well, but it's in a diagnostic lab. She's not doing cutting edge research. So will she be a good example of what we are trying to say? And I'm sitting here, I'm like, at least she's the national director in just a few years. And she's still working in the sciences. It's just in a lab. And she's managing all of the clinical laboratories in Ghana. She's just not necessarily sitting behind a test tube doing experiments. How does this not make her a good candidate for the kind of platform that we want to put her on? This is the mindset that we have, and we need to change. That is why when I say I'm so passionate about mentoring both men and women, I want to break this mindset in women, in men, for them to appreciate that even if the woman who we trained hasn't ended up in a lab running her own experiments and churning out her own data, at least she's a leader in the field that she's chosen. And other young ladies are seeing her and would never have imagined that they could get to a point like that. That is what we need to start showing, that as female, even as leaders in general, the kind of power or impact we want to wield shouldn't be the office that you occupy as a director or as a chair or as the head of a certain institution. The kind of power that we should be drunk on is the power that when you look behind you, you have 40 people who you have mentored with the mindset to know exactly what it is to be successful, to know exactly what it is to have impact in the kind of life that you're living. That army behind you is the power that you need and not the position of leadership that you are in. I think that is how you create a wave or a whole movement to change this mindset that we have. You know, and it takes one person to start it and believe in it. Coming here and meeting Gloria and seeing what she's doing is a testament to how one person can start a movement. And in our talks, in our discussions, I just realized that one of her former master students is currently in my department as a PhD student. And he is going to be mentored by my very good friend who also works in trypanosomes, just like Gloria. This is a cycle that we want to start creating and feeding off of each other and trying to help each other climb up the ladder together. You know, that is another way we can achieve equity in the kind of work that we do.